The sun set slowly over the distant horizon of the barren planet, casting its warm light over the sleek metal exterior of the stellar Voyager. Captain Sophie Hayes stood at the command deck, gazing at the sprawling alien city below her. The mission ahead seemed simple: make contact, assess the situation, and ensure peaceful relations with the newly discovered alien species, the Thalrim. But the moment she stepped onto their home planet, everything began to shift. The Thalrim had never seen humans before. Sophie knew their first impression would be crucial, but nothing could have prepared her for the feeling of alien eyes, intense, analytical, and completely unfamiliar, scrutinizing her from all angles. She stepped off the ship and onto the cracked earth of their world, flanked by her crew and flanked by the Thalrim representatives. At the front of the delegation stood Ridar, the young alien captain of the Thalrim fleet. He was tall, his skin a cool shade of violet, and his eyes were an unsettling shade of gold. His posture was erect, his gaze unwavering. He was beautiful in a way that Sophie couldn't quite place, both foreign and familiar at once. She felt an unexpected shiver run down her spine as he locked eyes with her. "Welcome, Captain Hayes," Ridar spoke in perfect English, his voice smooth and melodic. "We are pleased to host your people on our planet." Sophie nodded curtly, trying not to let her unease show. "Thank you, Captain Ridar. We look forward to peaceful negotiations." Ridar's lips curled slightly. Not quite a smile, but something close to it. "Peaceful relations, yes, but do understand we have our reservations. You are different from us." Sophie raised an eyebrow, sensing the underlying tension in his words. "I understand, but I assure you, our goal is to understand, not to conquer." "We have heard that claim before," he replied coldly. "Let us see if your actions speak louder than your words." The negotiation room was large and circular, designed with strange, organic architecture that seemed to grow rather than be built. The walls glowed softly, and the air was filled with the hum of distant machinery, creating a surreal atmosphere. Sophie sat across from Ridar, both surrounded by their respective teams. The only sound in the room the faint hum of the artificial atmosphere. Sophie leaned forward, trying to get a read on the situation. "We come in peace, Captain," she repeated, her voice steady. "We seek cooperation and understanding. Humanity is a young species, but we are capable of great things when united." Ridar's golden eyes narrowed, his gaze sharp as a blade. "You claim unity, yet your people are divided. You fight amongst yourselves even as you try to reach out to us. Tell me, Captain, how can we trust a species that does not trust itself?" Sophie clenched her jaw, feeling the weight of his words. It was true. Humanity had its faults, its divisions, its history of conflict. But they were growing, evolving, and it was that potential that drove her forward. "We are not perfect," she said, "but we are learning. We've faced wars, poverty, and division, and we've overcome them. We know what it means to fight for survival, and we know what it means to come together when it counts." Ridar studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with a slow movement, he stood and walked to the far wall. He touched one of the glowing symbols there, and the wall shifted, revealing an ancient map of the galaxy. "The Thalrim have survived for millennia. We have witnessed countless civilizations rise and fall, Captain. Some have come in peace. Others have not. Your species must prove it is different." Sophie stood, meeting his gaze. "And how do we prove that?" Ridar turned to her, his voice calm but heavy with meaning. You show us that you are worthy of trust, not with words, but with actions. Let us see what you are willing to sacrifice for this peace." As the meeting continued, Sophie couldn't shake the weight of Redar's words. Humanity's history was far from spotless, but she believed in their future. She had to. The Thalrim were powerful, advanced beyond anything humans had yet achieved. But she knew that if there was a chance to build something meaningful, it was now. Yet something gnawed at her, the way Redar looked at her, like he could see right through her, see all the vulnerabilities of humanity laid bare. The words that had echoed in her mind during their meeting replayed, growing louder with each passing moment. "You must prove you are worthy of trust." Sophie glanced over at her team. They were all on edge, unsure of how to proceed. The Thalrim had made it clear. They were not here to play. This was not just about diplomacy. It was about survival. She turned back to Redar, meeting his gaze with newfound resolve. "You will see, Captain. Humanity will prove itself, no matter the cost." Redar's lips twitched, as if amused, but he said nothing. The tension on the stellar Voyager was palpable as the days passed after the first meeting with the Thalrim. The crew was on edge, unsure of how to navigate the growing divide between their hopes for peace and the stark reality of the challenges ahead. Captain Sophie Hayes sat at the head of the table in the briefing room, her eyes scanning the reports. The data from their first encounter with the Thalrim had been inconclusive at best. While there was a clear desire for peaceful relations, the underlying distrust remained. "Captain, there's something about their language," Lieutenant Ari said, standing up and pointing at a holographic translation of the Thalrim speech. "We've been using the translator, but I'm starting to think it's more complex than just communication. There's something in the tone, almost like they're testing us." Sophie frowned. She had noticed it too. The way Redar's words were carefully measured, as though he were always waiting for something, as though he had an agenda that hadn't yet been revealed. "There's more to their culture than we've been shown," Sophie said, looking around the room. "We've only scratched the surface, and we need to understand them better if we're going to work together." "Do you think they'll ever truly trust us?" Commander Kane asked, his voice filled with skepticism. Sophie glanced at him, her eyes hardening. "We can't afford to think like that. If we don't try, we fail before we've even begun." The following day, Sophie and her crew were invited to attend a Thalrim cultural exhibition in the heart of their city. A grand hall filled with artifacts, paintings, and sculptures that told the story of the Thalrim's long and storied history. The walls shimmered with faint lights, and the entire space felt like it was alive, pulsating with the energy of a race that had known greatness for millennia. As they walked through the hall, Sophie couldn't help but marvel at the beauty of their craftsmanship. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. Delicate, organic shapes intertwined with geometric precision, representing a culture that had mastered the art of blending nature and technology. But there was something unsettling about it, too. The closer they got to the center of the exhibition, the more Sophie felt a sense of unease. The Thalrim were no longer just a species to her. They were a riddle, a challenge she wasn't sure she could solve. "You're quiet, Captain," Commander Kane remarked as they walked through the hall, his eyes also studying the artifacts. "What's on your mind?" Sophie paused, looking at the intricate alien sculptures that lined the walls. I think we're in over our heads, she said, more to herself than to Kane. The more I learn about them, the more I realize how different we truly are. Their entire culture is built on power and hierarchy. We're humans. We're built on cooperation, on adaptability. That's why we've survived this long. And what's the problem with that? Kane asked, curious. The problem is, Sophie said, her voice low, the Thalrim don't understand cooperation. They understand dominance. Everything about their culture is based on control, on testing boundaries, on making sure they stay on top. Do you think they'll ever change? Kane asked. Sophie hesitated, eyes scanning the gallery of Thalrim history. I don't know, she said, her voice tinged with uncertainty. But we have to find a way to make it work. Because if we don't, humanity will never be more than an afterthought to them. Later that evening, as the crew debriefed, the full weight of what they had discovered began to sink in. The Thalrim, despite their superior technology and long history, were not interested in peaceful coexistence, at least not in the way humans understood it. They saw power as the only true form of peace. If they could control their enemies, they could call it peace. We're not like them, Lieutenant Ari said, his voice quiet but resolute. We don't seek control, and we never will. We have to make them see that. That's what I'm worried about, Sophie replied, rubbing her temple. We can't just change their centuries-old worldview, but we can show them that we're different, that we're not like the other species they've wiped out. Do you think they'll ever accept us? Ari asked, looking at her with a hint of doubt in his eyes. Sophie's gaze hardened. They have no choice. The next day, Sophie and Redar met once more, this time in the heart of the Thalrim fleet. The grand alien vessels surrounded them, towering and intimidating, their presence a constant reminder of the gulf between their species. I've been thinking about our conversation, Captain, Redar said, his voice measured, almost amused. You claim humanity's strength lies in its ability to adapt, to cooperate. But that's not what your people have shown me so far. You're weak. You're divided. Your species is still struggling to find its place in the galaxy. Sophie met his gaze, unflinching. You think we're weak, Redar, but you're wrong. Humanity's greatest strength isn't power or dominance. It's our ability to overcome, to adapt, to fight when we're down, to fight when we're outnumbered, to do whatever it takes to survive. Redar's expression faltered for just a moment. And you think you can teach us that? I think we can teach each other, Sophie said firmly. But only if you're willing to listen. Days turned into weeks aboard the stellar Voyager. The tense partnership between humanity and the Thalrim slowly beginning to take shape. Despite their initial clashes, Captain Sophie Hayes and Redar found themselves drawn together again and again, forced to collaborate on joint missions to stabilize planetary resources and neutralize threats that affected both races. During these missions, Sophie found herself gradually understanding Redar better. She saw beyond his cold, analytical exterior and began to recognize something deeper. A quiet burden he carried, one born of centuries of tradition and expectation. It mirrored her own. One evening, while analyzing star maps together, Sophie finally asked the question she'd been holding back. Why do your people see power as the only path to peace? Redar hesitated, his golden eyes searching her face for sincerity. Our history is one of chaos, he replied slowly. We learned the hard way that weakness leads to destruction. Our ancestors believed power could protect us from the darkness. And has it? Sophie asked gently. Redar looked away, his voice lowering. Until now, perhaps. But meeting humanity, meeting you, challenges that belief. Your people thrive not by dominating, but by enduring, adapting. It confuses us. Sophie leaned closer, sensing his vulnerability. We endure because we know what it means to stand together. We have flaws, yes, but those flaws bind us together. Unity is stronger than control. Redar was quiet for a moment, considering her words. Perhaps there's wisdom in your ways, but to embrace them fully would require more than a change. It would require bravery. It would require trust. Sophie reached out carefully, placing her hand gently on the table near his. Then trust me, she said quietly. Let us show you a different way. For the first time, Redar smiled. A genuine, hesitant smile that made Sophie's heart skip a beat. Perhaps, he said softly, we can build that bridge together. Subscribe now to find out if Sophie and Redar's newfound connection can unite two worlds or ignite an even greater conflict. The fragile alliance between humanity and the Thalrim faced its first real test sooner than anyone expected. A distress signal blared suddenly aboard the stellar Voyager, breaking the brief calm that had settled over the ship. It was an emergency message from a human colony under attack, an attack led by renegade Thalrim forces opposed to the newfound alliance. Captain Sophie Hayes stood frozen in front of the comm screen, feeling a heavy weight settle in her chest. Beside her, Redar's expression hardened as he recognized the symbols identifying the attacking ships. They are from my faction, Redar admitted, voice tight with frustration. Those who see our partnership as weakness. Commander Kane stepped forward, alarmed. Captain, the colony can't withstand a sustained assault. We need to respond now. Sophie turned sharply to Redar, eyes blazing. Will your people stand with us against their own? Will you? Redar hesitated, his golden eyes filled with internal conflict. His voice was strained as he spoke. If I fight my own, there's no going back. My own people will brand me a traitor. Sophie stepped closer, unwavering. But if you don't fight with us, you prove them right. You'll lose everything we've built, everything we've fought for. The silence stretched between them, heavy and painful. Finally, Redar met her eyes, a fire sparking within his gaze. Then I choose to fight beside you. Together, we prove both our peoples wrong. The crew of the stellar Voyager moved swiftly, preparing for battle. The renegade fleet loomed ahead, formidable and ruthless. Sophie stood beside Redar, their hands briefly touching, a moment of quiet solidarity before the storm. As the ships engaged, chaos erupted. The night was lit by weapon fire, explosions scattering across the darkness. Yet through the turmoil, Sophie and Redar's alliance held steady, their leadership giving strength to their crews. The renegades faltered, surprised by the unexpected unity between humans and the Thalrim. But amidst victory, tragedy struck. Commander Kane was captured, and Sophie was forced to make a devastating choice, to pursue the retreating enemy or save her captured officer. Redar grabbed her arm, pleading, "We can't risk it, Sophie. It's exactly what they want." Her eyes met his, filled with pain and determination. "I can't abandon him. I can't abandon any of them." Redar stared at her, understanding and grief intermingling in his gaze. "Then I'll go with you," he said firmly. "We face this together." Together they launched a daring rescue, fighting side by side until Kane was safe and the renegades driven back. Exhausted and battered, they stood amidst the aftermath, their bond stronger than ever, tested and proven in the crucible of conflict. But Sophie knew the greatest challenge still lay ahead. The galaxy watched closely, and now their unity was no longer just about survival. It had become a symbol, a threat, and perhaps their greatest hope.